The Critics' Choice celebration of Black cinema and TV gala is a night where the most powerful, most influential, and most glamorous figures in Hollywood gather under one roof. The glittering lights, the hum of conversation, the flashes of cameras, it's a world apart from the ordinary. Yet, every now and then, something happens that cuts through the polished surface of the evening, a moment that refuses to be ignored. A moment that makes everyone pause, stare, and, if they're lucky, witness something extraordinary. This year, that moment came in the form of Meghan Markle walking into the gala, followed by a Netflix cameraman whose presence alone sparked curiosity, tension, and, in one unforgettable instance, unrestrained laughter from Spike Lee. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine stepping into that room. The air thick with perfume and anticipation, the chatter of celebrities bouncing off the high ceilings, and the glittering gowns catching every beam of light. You've been invited to witness not just the celebration of Black cinema, but a gathering of minds and talent that shaped the future of Hollywood itself. It's exclusive, intimate, and electric. And then, suddenly, the room shifts. Something, or someone, enters, and the entire dynamic changes. That's the power of presence, the kind of presence Meghan Markle carried that night. The first thing you need to understand is why this story matters. It's not just about a royal appearing at a Hollywood gala. It's about the collision of worlds, the tension between expectation and reality, and the unpredictable human reactions that follow. Spike Lee, a director known for his sharp wit, unflinching honesty, and commanding presence, noticed something that others did not. And when he reacted, he did so in a way that no one could have predicted. His laughter didn't just fill the room. It punctuated it, creating a ripple effect that transformed the energy of the gala and left everyone in a state of stunned curiosity. Now, you may be wondering, why was Meghan Markle there? And why was she being followed by a Netflix cameraman? On the surface, it might seem straightforward. A public appearance, a professional engagement, a chance to mingle with Hollywood elites. But beneath the surface, the implications are far more intricate. Meghan's presence carried with it layers of expectation, speculation, and controversy. It raised questions, whispered rumors, and sparked curiosity. What was she hoping to achieve? Who did she want to impress? And, most importantly, how would the established figures in the room respond to her sudden intrusion into this space of celebration? The red carpet itself tells a story. Celebrities posing, photographers shouting names, the constant click of cameras capturing each carefully curated moment. Yet, even among the glitter and glamour, there is an undercurrent of tension. There are unspoken hierarchies, subtle alliances, and silent judgments. In this charged atmosphere, the arrival of Meghan Markle did not go unnoticed. In fact, it created a ripple that stretched across the entire room, capturing attention in a way few guests ever could. And while some observers might have anticipated polite greetings, cordial nods, or discreet acknowledgement, what actually happened defied all expectations. Spike Lee's reaction was the first true sign that something extraordinary was unfolding. Known for his candid commentary and unfiltered observations, he didn't merely notice Meghan Markle. He reacted in a way that was as human as it was unexpected. It started with a grin, a subtle shift in expression, and then escalated into a full-bodied laugh that resonated across the room. It was not mockery, nor was it derision. It was a reaction to the sheer audacity of the moment, the collision of worlds, and the tension that hung in the air like a tangible presence. His laughter was a release, a commentary, and a signal all at once. And everyone in the room felt it, whether they wanted to or not. But this story isn't just about one laugh, as powerful and contagious as it was. It's about what led up to it, and what followed. It's about the subtle shifts in attention, the silent judgments, and the whisper networks that immediately went to work. Some celebrities whispered behind their hands, eyes darting toward Meghan and the cameraman. Others smiled politely, masking curiosity with practiced grace. And some, like Spike Lee, could not contain their reactions. The mixture of amusement, disbelief, and fascination created an atmosphere that was electric, impossible to ignore, and charged with unspoken tension. And the Netflix cameraman trailing Meghan only intensified the effect. Every movement, every gesture, was captured, documented, and potentially destined for public consumption. The presence of the camera created its own energy, amplifying awareness and magnifying reactions. It wasn't merely observation. It was performance, for Meghan, for the audience, and perhaps for the world beyond the gala's walls. The knowledge that every glance, every smile, and every interaction could be recorded added a layer of pressure, curiosity, and unpredictability. And in that environment, unexpected reactions are inevitable. What makes this story even more compelling is the timing. The gala itself is an annual celebration, a moment to honor the brilliance of Black cinema and television, and yet this year, it became an entirely different narrative. Instead of focusing solely on awards and speeches, the night became defined by human reactions, unplanned moments, and the collision of fame, royalty, and cinematic history. It is a vivid illustration of how one presence can alter the dynamics of an entire event, revealing not only the personalities of those involved, but also the subtle power of observation, attention, and humor. So why should you care about this night, this laugh, this intersection of worlds? Because it shows the human side of celebrities, the unpredictable nature of live events, and the subtle cultural commentary that unfolds when two very different spheres collide. Spike Lee's laughter was more than just amusement. It was a reflection of the absurdity, irony, and tension that can arise when Hollywood meets royalty, when media attention intersects with personal presence, and when expectation confronts reality. It was a laugh that spoke volumes without a single word. And yet, despite all this build-up, despite the attention, speculation, and preparation, the night was far from over. That laughter, as contagious and disruptive as it was, set the stage for events that would escalate in ways no one could have foreseen. Conversations behind closed doors, subtle gestures, whispered exchanges. All of these would contribute to a narrative that would keep the gala in the headlines long after the final applause. Every detail mattered, every glance was significant, and every reaction had meaning. By now, you're probably asking, what exactly did Meghan do to elicit such a response? What was Spike Lee thinking in that instant? How did the other attendees process this unexpected intrusion into an otherwise controlled, glamorous environment? These questions aren't merely rhetorical. They are central to understanding the magnitude of what unfolded that night. And while the answers will unfold in the chapters to come, it is crucial to grasp the stakes, the tension, and the human drama that set the scene for what would become an unforgettable moment in Hollywood history. This introduction sets the stage for everything to come. It teases the conflict, hints at tension, and primes the audience for the unfolding story. The gala, the laughter, and Meghan's presence are not just isolated events. They are interconnected threads that will weave together to create a narrative full of suspense, humor, and emotional resonance. And just as importantly, it leaves you wondering, what happened next? What did Spike Lee see that made him laugh? How did Meghan Markle navigate the room with the camera in tow? And what did the rest of Hollywood think as it all unfolded? The answers to these questions are coming, and they are more surprising than you might imagine. But for now, hold on to the image of that glittering gala, the hum of conversation, and the first ripple of disruption caused by one unexpected guest. The story is only beginning, and what comes next will change everything. Setting the stage for moments that are as dramatic, ironic, and unforgettable as any film Spike Lee has ever directed. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The evening began like any other star-studded gala, or so it seemed at first glance. The red carpet was stretched taut, gleaming under a cascade of camera flashes. It was a river of light, punctuated by the occasional sparkle of sequins and the flash of metallic accessories. Celebrities drifted along it like a constellation of polished stars, each carefully curated moment photographed and documented for posterity. And yet, from the very first step onto the carpet, there was a tension in the air, a sense that tonight, something unusual was about to occur. Picture the scene: the velvet ropes lining the red carpet, the photographers shouting names with the precision of auctioneers, the whisper of silk dresses and tailored tuxedos brushing past one another. The air smelled faintly of expensive perfume, mingled with the subtle tang of fresh flowers and the faint undertone of anticipation. This was the 8th Critics' Choice celebration of Black cinema and TV, a night designed to honor not only performances but influence, power, and artistry in the world of Black cinema. Every detail of the gala had been meticulously orchestrated, from the lighting to the seating arrangements to the timing of the awards. Yet, for all the planning, the unexpected always had a way of asserting itself. Guests arrived in waves. One moment, the focus was on the carefully choreographed photographs of stars smiling for the cameras. The next, it was the subtle interplay of alliances and rivalries. In such a room, appearances matter, but perceptions matter even more. The way a smile is held, a nod given, or a glance exchanged can ripple across the room, sending waves of speculation and curiosity. The gala was a living, breathing organism, each attendee a cell contributing to its energy and pulse. And as the night began, everyone felt it. The electric hum of anticipation that signals the arrival of someone who might alter the dynamic of the evening. Even among the glittering stars, some names carried extra weight. Spike Lee, already seated near the front, surveyed the room with a practiced eye. Known for his sharp insight, he was never a passive observer. His presence alone set a tone, a subtle reminder that in this room of celebrities, artistry and wit mattered as much as appearance. Around him, conversations flowed in polite waves, punctuated by laughter and applause. But underneath it all, there was a current of tension. The gala was not just a celebration. It was a stage where social hierarchies played out subtly, where reputations could be subtly enhanced or undermined with a single remark or glance. As the guests continued to arrive, the anticipation mounted. The camera flashes created brief bursts of illumination that revealed more than just dresses and tuxedos. They captured expressions, micro-reactions, and fleeting glances that told stories of their own. Some attendees offered practice smiles to the cameras while scanning the crowd for familiar faces. Others entered quietly, slipping past photographers with a knowing confidence. Each entrance was a small narrative, a chance for the attendees to stake their presence in the memory of the evening. And then, like a sudden gust of wind, the atmosphere shifted. It happened subtly at first, a ripple of curiosity moving through the crowd, eyes flicking toward the source. And then it became impossible to ignore. Meghan Markle entered the gala, not walking alone, not blending into the background, but accompanied by a Netflix cameraman who followed her every move. The presence of the camera transformed her entrance from ordinary to extraordinary, turning it into a spectacle that immediately drew attention. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. Smiles froze into mild expressions of surprise. The energy of the room shifted, bending toward this new point of focus. The reaction was instantaneous, but varied. Some attendees whispered behind cupped hands, trying to process the unexpected presence. Others allowed polite curiosity to mask their fascination, while a few raised eyebrows openly, unable to conceal their surprise. In the midst of it all, Spike Lee's gaze was locked onto Meghan's entrance, his expression shifting from interest to something far more visceral. A grin formed, subtle at first, as if he were already anticipating the absurdity and drama that were about to unfold. He was witnessing not just an entrance, but a statement, a collision of worlds that no one had predicted. There was something almost cinematic about the moment. The lights catching Meghan's gown, the camera following her every step, the subtle reactions of the attendees, and the undercurrent of tension rippling through the room. For a brief instant, the gala seemed to suspend its usual rhythm. The awards, the speeches, the careful choreography of the evening, all of it became secondary to this unexpected narrative unfolding in real time. It was a story being written in the space between glances, gestures, and the quiet gasp of recognition that occasionally punctuated the room. Even the staff at the gala, usually adept at maintaining decorum and flow, could not ignore the shift. Servers carrying trays of champagne navigated the crowd with extra caution, avoiding any disruption that might draw attention to the subtle upheaval in the room. Photographers, many of whom had been focused on other celebrities, pivoted instinctively, capturing the moment from multiple angles. The presence of a Netflix cameraman only heightened the intensity, as every movement was now documented with a precision that suggested this would not remain a private memory of the night. It would become part of a larger narrative. As Meghan moved further into the room, the ripple effect continued. Guests shifted subtly in their seats, turning heads to follow her path. Conversations resumed, but now under a new tension, a thread of curiosity weaving through each interaction. The gala was, in essence, a stage, and Meghan had just entered in a way that rewrote the script. Spike Lee, ever the observer, leaned slightly forward, his attention unwavering. The grin on his face suggested that he understood the significance of the moment long before anyone else did. He could see the potential for amusement, tension, and the unexpected, all the ingredients for a story that would echo far beyond the walls of the gala. And yet, despite the attention, Meghan's movements were controlled, deliberate, almost rehearsed. She navigated the crowd with poise, acknowledging some guests with a nod, a brief smile, or a whispered greeting. The camera captured it all. The subtle choreography of her presence, the interplay of gaze and gesture, the way she commanded attention without overtly seeking it. Every step was a statement, and every glance added to the narrative being constructed in real time. The room, for all its sophistication and glamour, had become a living, breathing stage upon which history might just unfold. The energy continued to build as the first murmurs of recognition spread. "Did you see who's here?" someone whispered. "Is that?" And the question hung in the air, unanswered but potent. The anticipation was palpable, the collective curiosity growing with every passing second. In that moment, the gala was no longer just a celebration of black cinema and television. It had become a microcosm of celebrity culture, fame, and human reaction. Every eye in the room was drawn toward the source, every mind processing the significance in real time. And then came the first audible sign of disruption. A chuckle, subtle at first, but unmistakable. Spike Lee's laughter began to bubble to the surface, almost unnoticed in the initial commotion, but powerful enough to alter the energy in the room. It was not just amusement. It was recognition of the absurdity, the audacity, and the tension that hung in the air. His laughter acted like a catalyst, releasing some of the built-up pressure while simultaneously drawing attention to it. Others noticed, some glanced around awkwardly, and a ripple of curiosity intensified as people tried to discern the cause. The arrival of Meghan Markle, the presence of the Netflix cameraman, and Spike Lee's reaction created a dynamic impossible to ignore. It was a perfect storm of spectacle, anticipation, and human behavior, unfolding in real time. And while the gala had been planned to the finest detail, this was the kind of unscripted moment that no amount of preparation could have anticipated. Every observer, whether a guest, a staff member, or a photographer, was now a participant in a narrative that was unfolding live, unpredictable, and unforgettable. The night was still young. Awards had not yet been presented. Speeches were yet to be delivered. Yet, in those first moments of Meghan's entrance and Spike Lee's laughter, the tone of the evening had shifted irreversibly. The gala had been transformed from a structured celebration into a story of curiosity, tension, and human reaction, one that would resonate far beyond the confines of the room. Every glance, every whisper, and every movement became significant, setting the stage for what would become a night remembered not just for the accolades, but for the moments that no one could have predicted. But just as the room began to settle, just as the murmurs began to quiet, something happened that would elevate the tension to an entirely new level. A glance exchanged, a subtle gesture unnoticed by most, yet captured by the camera, hinted that what had begun as a ripple of curiosity was about to become a wave of drama. And in that instant, everyone, Spike Lee included, knew that the night was far from ordinary. What happened next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The room had barely begun to absorb the shockwaves of Meghan Markle's arrival when another layer of tension revealed itself. She wasn't just walking into the gala. She was escorted, or perhaps accompanied, by a Netflix cameraman whose presence was impossible to ignore. In Hollywood, cameras often follow celebrities, but this was different. It wasn't a typical paparazzi swarm or the fleeting attention of a press photographer. This was controlled, deliberate, and unyielding. Every step she took was being documented, not for a fleeting headline, but as part of a narrative that Netflix itself seemed intent on capturing. The cameraman's presence added weight, significance, and an air of performance to what could have been just another entrance. Imagine being one of the other attendees at that moment. You're navigating polite conversation, champagne in hand, when suddenly a presence enters that commands every eye in the room. You notice the quiet hum of the camera, the subtle way it tracks Meghan, almost as if the entire gala were a stage for a production that had begun without warning. Guests shifted their gaze, some in curiosity, others in discomfort. There was a silent recognition that this was not an ordinary appearance. It was a statement. And while Meghan moved with the poise and grace for which she's known, the camera added an unmistakable layer of intensity. Some of the celebrities leaned in slightly, exchanging whispered remarks. A few furrowed brows in mild disapproval, not out of hostility, but because the presence of cameras always carries implications: control, publicity, and narrative. A gala is a carefully managed event, every element planned, every photograph anticipated. And yet here was a disruption that no one could ignore, a moving point of attention that was as deliberate as it was provocative. It wasn't just Meghan stepping into the room. It was a story being broadcast silently, in real time, for anyone watching, documenting, or paying attention. Spike Lee noticed it immediately. He's a man whose attention to detail is legendary, whose observations cut through pretense, and whose humor can be mercilessly precise. When he saw Meghan moving through the room with a cameraman in tow, something about the calculated spectacle and the inevitable ripple of attention struck him as absurdly entertaining. A grin formed on his face, subtle at first, almost imperceptible to anyone not looking directly at him. But then the grin widened, his lips parting slightly as amusement bubbled to the surface. It was the kind of reaction that promised laughter, but also carried the weight of insight, a recognition of how staged appearances collide with raw human behavior. The whispers among the attendees grew louder. Some wondered aloud, is that really her? And why the camera? Others tried to mask their curiosity with casual glances, pretending to be absorbed in conversation, while their eyes kept flicking toward Meghan and the lens that followed her every move. The tension was palpable. In a room filled with Hollywood stars accustomed to media attention, the presence of an ever-present camera still managed to disrupt the usual rhythm, forcing everyone to recalibrate how they moved, interacted, and even thought about what they were doing. And yet Meghan seemed unfazed. Her posture was impeccable, her gaze calm, measured. There was no rush, no overt performance, only a careful navigation of the space she had entered. She nodded politely to familiar faces, smiled at those she recognized, and moved deliberately as the camera tracked her every step. It was almost a dance, a negotiation between public presence and personal control, between attention and autonomy. And as she moved, the reactions she provoked were telling. Some people leaned in, genuinely intrigued. Others stiffened, unsure how to respond. And Spike Lee, observing the subtle choreography, prepared for the moment he knew was coming. The dynamic between Meghan and the cameraman added a layer of complexity that heightened the tension. Every subtle shift of her expression, every glance, every gesture was being documented, creating a living narrative that extended beyond the gala itself. In Hollywood, appearances can be scripted, rehearsed, and polished, but they also reveal more than intended. The presence of a camera magnifies every detail, every nuance, every imperfection. And tonight, that magnification was inevitable. It made each movement heavier, each glance more consequential, each smile more scrutinized. The reactions of the other guests were a study in human behavior. Some, accustomed to navigating high-pressure environments, maintained composure, their eyes briefly flicking toward Meghan before returning to their conversations. Others could not help but be drawn in, curiosity and intrigue impossible to mask. And the staff, trained to operate seamlessly amidst chaos, were suddenly conscious of every movement, ensuring that the event proceeded smoothly while accommodating an unexpected level of attention focused on one individual. Spike Lee's reaction, however, was different. He didn't merely notice the presence of the camera, he understood its significance. He saw the humor in the situation. The juxtaposition of Meghan's poised elegance against the almost comically meticulous documentation of her every step. There was a kind of absurdity in the controlled chaos, and it struck him as a moment worth relishing. The grin on his face widened, his eyes sparkled with anticipation, and a subtle chuckle escaped him, a sound that would soon reverberate throughout the room, creating ripples of curiosity and amusement. Meghan's movement through the room created a silent narrative. She was not just a guest, she was a point of focus, a moving story, an unspoken commentary on fame, attention, and the intersections of media and celebrity. The cameraman, professional and unobtrusive yet undeniably present, amplified this narrative, ensuring that every motion, every interaction, every gesture would be captured for posterity. It was a dynamic that transformed the gala from a static, ceremonial event into a living, breathing story unfolding in real time, one that demanded attention, interpretation, and reaction. And then, as she reached the center of the room, something subtle but significant occurred. Eyes that had been casually observing her now locked with a focus that suggested recognition, curiosity, and anticipation. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. Heads turned with barely concealed interest. The air seemed to thicken with tension, the kind of unspoken electricity that signals an impending moment of drama, humor, or revelation. It was the kind of moment that can only be felt in person, a charged stillness that precedes the release of energy, the moment before laughter, surprise, or shock. Spike Lee's chuckle, which had been quiet at first, began to grow. It was a low, controlled sound at first, almost as if he were trying to contain it. But containment proved impossible. His amusement was genuine, infectious, and impossible to ignore. Those nearest him glanced over, curious, and a few couldn't help but join in with nervous laughter. The room's energy shifted yet again, this time under the weight of recognition, absurdity, and the subtle humor inherent in the situation. And still, Meghan moved forward with unwavering poise. Each step, each smile, each subtle nod was a measured choice, an assertion of control in a space now charged with unexpected attention. The Netflix cameraman continued to trail her, capturing the unfolding narrative with precision, documenting a moment that was already becoming a story whispered, speculated, and analyzed by everyone present. The juxtaposition of deliberate grace and relentless observation created a tension that was almost palpable, a dance of perception, attention, and human reaction. Even as Spike Lee laughed, the other guests were processing the scene in real time. Some were amused, some bewildered, and some were simply trying to understand what had prompted such an unrestrained response from one of the evening's most respected figures. It was a moment that highlighted the unpredictable nature of live events, the collision of controlled appearances with human spontaneity, and the way attention can shift an entire room in an instant. But the night was far from over. Meghan Markle's presence, the Netflix cameraman's silent documentation, and Spike Lee's laughter were just the beginning of a cascade of reactions, whispers, and subtle maneuvers that would unfold over the course of the gala. The stage had been set. The players were in position. And as the room adjusted to this unexpected narrative, everyone, celebrities, staff, and observers alike, realized that the evening would be remembered not just for awards or speeches, but for the human drama quietly, yet powerfully, taking shape before their eyes. What happened next would amplify the tension, intrigue, and humor to an entirely new level, and no one in the room was ready for it. The room had begun to settle into a rhythm, the usual ebb and flow of conversation and laughter restoring a veneer of normalcy. But normalcy, in the presence of Meghan Markle and her silent Netflix shadow, was a fragile illusion. Spike Lee, seated comfortably yet alert, had been watching quietly, processing the scene in his signature way, observant, witty, and acutely aware of every nuance. And then it happened. It wasn't a loud commotion or a dramatic gesture. It was subtle, a glance, a gesture, a perfectly timed pause. And in that instant, something about Meghan Markle's demeanor, her interaction with the surrounding guests, and the persistent, watchful lens of the cameraman triggered a reaction that would define the evening. Spike Lee, who had been maintaining a controlled curiosity, suddenly broke into a grin. It started small, a twitch of amusement at the corner of his mouth, but it grew quickly, spreading across his face like wildfire. Anyone paying attention could see the spark in his eyes, the way the corners of his lips curved upward with uncontainable delight. And then he laughed. It was a laugh that began low, almost imperceptible, like a bubble rising from the depths, but it didn't stay contained. It grew, rolling across his chest, spilling into the room with a force that demanded attention. The sound was unmistakable, a mix of surprise, amusement, and recognition that transcended polite decorum. Spike Lee's laughter was a declaration. Something remarkable, absurd, or wholly unexpected had occurred, and it was impossible to ignore. The room paused, if only for a fraction of a second, to register the magnitude of his reaction. People nearby glanced at one another, unsure how to interpret it. Was he mocking? Was he impressed? Was he responding to some private joke only he could see? In a room of carefully curated appearances and rehearsed interactions, such an unfiltered reaction was shocking. The juxtaposition of decorum and spontaneity created a tension that was almost cinematic. Everyone, consciously or unconsciously, turned their attention toward the source of Spike Lee's amusement. And in that instant, the entire dynamic of the gala shifted. To understand the significance of this moment, it helps to know Spike Lee. He is a man whose career has been defined by sharp observations, fearless storytelling, and a refusal to conform to expectation. His films are layered with irony, humor, and pointed social commentary. He approaches life, and by extension any room he occupies, with an awareness that is both incisive and entertaining. When he laughs, it is rarely just at something simple. It is at the intersection of absurdity, truth, and the unexpected. And in this case, he was witnessing a convergence of all three. But what had sparked it? That was the question everyone wanted answered, though few dared to ask aloud. Meghan Markle, poised and composed, had done nothing overtly comedic or provocative. She had not stumbled, flubbed a line, or made a bold scene. Yet, Spike Lee's laughter suggested that something about her presence, the choreography of her movements, or perhaps the persistent lens of the Netflix camera, struck him as utterly absurd in a way that only he could fully appreciate. The audience around him was caught in a liminal space, unsure whether to be concerned, amused, or simply intrigued by the sight of one of Hollywood's most respected directors losing composure. The whispers began almost immediately. "What's so funny?" Someone asked quietly, trying to peer over the shoulders of nearby guests. Another guest leaned in, whispering conspiratorially, "Did you see what she just did?" The room was alive with speculation, curiosity, and a subtle tension that threaded through every conversation. Even as champagne glasses clinked and servers moved carefully through the crowd, there was an undercurrent of focused attention, a magnetic pull toward the interplay unfolding before them. Spike Lee's laughter had a ripple effect. It emboldened others to look more closely, to notice the subtle gestures, the carefully measured steps, and the almost imperceptible signals being exchanged in the room. What had seemed ordinary moments seconds before were now imbued with significance. Every glance, every movement, every interaction was being interpreted through the lens of what had triggered the director's reaction. And in a room of actors, producers, and directors, where every detail is magnified and interpreted, the implications were profound. It was also a moment of tension. Laughter, especially unrestrained and unexpected, can unsettle even the most confident individuals. Some guests smiled politely, masking their discomfort with practiced grace. Others couldn't help but be drawn in, curiosity and amusement flickering across their faces. And some, unsure how to respond, observed quietly, waiting for the situation to clarify itself. The atmosphere became a blend of intrigue, humor, and social calculation, a delicate balance between entertainment and etiquette. The source of Spike Lee's amusement, while not immediately clear to the room at large, was layered. Meghan Markle, for all her poise and composure, carried an aura of controlled performance. The Netflix cameraman, professional yet persistent, amplified her presence. And the interplay between the two created a tension that was impossible to ignore, a collision of public perception, celebrity scrutiny, and the subtle absurdity of being simultaneously observed and performing observation. Spike Lee's laughter was a response to the perfect storm of calculated image, human behavior, and social expectation colliding in real time. And yet, for all its humor, there was also a sense of irony. Here was a room celebrating the brilliance and achievements of Black cinema and television, a space defined by artistry, recognition, and cultural influence. And in the midst of it, a royal presence accompanied by a streaming giant's camera created a moment that, while amusing, also underscored the complex interplay of fame, media, and perception. Spike Lee's laughter was a punctuation mark, a way of acknowledging the absurdity, but also a recognition of the deeper narrative unfolding around him. It was impossible for those watching not to be affected. The subtle energy shift caused by one man's laughter drew attention, curiosity, and speculation. Eyes darted around the room, searching for context, meaning, and explanation. Conversations faltered as attendees recalibrated, balancing their awareness of Spike Lee's reaction with their desire to maintain composure. The gala, meticulously planned and rehearsed, had become a stage for unscripted drama, a narrative unfolding in real time with unpredictable consequences. And then came the first signs of the ripple effect. Guests who had initially observed with polite curiosity began to engage more directly, exchanging whispers and tentative glances. Some leaned toward one another, attempting to interpret the significance of what they had just witnessed. Others, emboldened by the recognition that a moment of genuine human reaction was occurring, allowed themselves to smile or chuckle. The room, in essence, had shifted from structured elegance to interactive observation, each participant responding to the subtle cues of attention, humor, and social interplay. Even as Spike Lee's laughter continued to resonate, there was a growing awareness that this was only the beginning. The moment had been sparked by Meghan Markle's presence and the cameraman's careful documentation, but its consequences were far-reaching. It was a reminder that live events are unpredictable, that human reactions are complex, and that even the most carefully orchestrated gatherings are vulnerable to disruption by authenticity, audacity, and unexpected intersections of social forces. And as the night continued, Spike Lee's amusement hinted at something larger yet to come, a chain of events, conversations, and subtle confrontations that would build upon this initial spark of laughter. The energy in the room was charged, and everyone could feel it, even if they couldn't articulate why. A single reaction, unplanned and genuine, had set in motion a series of moments that would define the evening in ways no one could have anticipated. But what Spike Lee saw, and what triggered that laughter, was only the opening act. What unfolded next would elevate tension, intrigue, and drama to levels that no one in the room was prepared for. And it would all revolve around Meghan Markle, the Netflix camera, and the unstoppable momentum of unexpected human reaction. The initial laughter had barely settled, yet the energy in the room had irrevocably shifted. In a space built on elegance, polished presentation, and controlled interaction, the unexpected was now in full effect. Spike Lee's reaction had done more than just break the rhythm. It had ignited curiosity, speculation, and subtle tension across the gala. Every eye, every whisper, every micro-expression became magnified, analyzed, and reinterpreted. The room had become an ecosystem of observation, where each individual played a role in a story that was unfolding organically, unpredictably, and irresistibly. As Meghan Markle moved through the crowd, whispers began to ripple outward like a quiet storm. At first, they were soft, tentative, almost imperceptible. "Did you see that? What is she doing here? Is that really her?" But they multiplied quickly, feeding off one another, creating a wave of hushed conversation that threaded through the gala. The room was filled with the subtle hum of intrigue, punctuated by sharp intake of breaths, the clink of glasses, and the occasional pause mid-sentence. No one spoke too loudly. Decorum was still observed, but the undercurrent of fascination was undeniable. Some of the celebrities attempted to maintain composure, masking curiosity with polite smiles and nods. Yet, subtle signals betrayed their true reactions. A head tilted just slightly, eyes flicking toward Meghan's path. A hand adjusted a cuff or smoothed a dress, a subconscious gesture of reassurance or distraction. These micro-behaviors, often unnoticed in ordinary situations, were magnified here, as if the room itself had become acutely aware of the narrative developing before it. Even those who tried to appear unbothered were participating in the silent choreography of observation and reaction. A select few whispered conspiratorially, leaning in close, exchanging comments that were half joke, half analysis. "I didn't expect her tonight," one murmured. "And with the camera," another added, trailing off as if the implication were self-evident. The presence of a Netflix cameraman was no minor detail. It suggested intent, visibility, and a deliberate curation of the narrative unfolding in real time. Suddenly, Meghan's movements were not just physical. They were symbolic, a statement, and a provocation wrapped in the guise of casual elegance. The ripple effect of Spike Lee's laughter continued to play out. Some guests, emboldened by the director's unfiltered response, allowed themselves small smiles, quiet chuckles, or glances of amusement. Others, however, were unsure how to respond, caught between curiosity, social expectation, and an innate sense of decorum. The juxtaposition of these reactions created an intricate tapestry of human behavior, one that could be read, interpreted, and analyzed by anyone paying attention. The gala, meticulously curated and rehearsed, had transformed into a dynamic tableau of social interaction, subtle rivalry, and observation. As the whispers grew, there were also audible gasps. Not dramatic, not exaggerated, but sharp intakes of breath that signaled surprise, incredulity, or recognition. A guest in the back of the room murmured, "She actually came," while someone else near the front whispered, "And with the camera?" The gasps were spontaneous, raw, and impossible to contain. They punctuated conversations, drawing attention and signaling to everyone in proximity that something unusual and undeniably noteworthy was occurring. Meanwhile, Meghan continued her careful navigation of the space. Each gesture, each glance, each nod was deliberate. She acknowledged familiar faces, smiled politely at strangers, and maintained a calm, composed demeanor. Yet, despite her poise, she could not fully control the reactions around her. The whispers, gasps, and attention were organic, unpredictable, and beyond the reach of even the most meticulous preparation. The presence of the cameraman amplified the intensity, ensuring that every movement was observed, interpreted, and documented, adding layers of narrative complexity to an already charged situation. Observers noted the subtle hierarchy of reactions. Some were excited, delighted by the unexpected spectacle, while others were wary, calculating the implications of Meghan's presence for their own positioning within the social ecosystem. Each reaction was influenced by awareness, curiosity, and the unspoken social codes of celebrity behavior. Even staff members, trained to maintain discretion, found themselves drawn into the narrative, their own observations mingling with those of the guests they served. The room had become an intricate web of attention, with Meghan at its center. Spike Lee, for his part, was a focal point of attention in his own right. His laughter, initially low and restrained, had now become a subtle beacon, guiding the reactions of those around him. People leaned in slightly, curious, attempting to catch whatever he had seen that prompted such an unfiltered response. And while no one could articulate precisely what had triggered the laughter, they all understood that it carried meaning, commentary, and judgment, all without a single word being spoken. It was a study in the power of human reaction, the way one person's response can set the tone for an entire room. Yet not all reactions were lighthearted or amused. A few guests shifted uncomfortably, their expressions tight, their body language defensive. They glanced around to gauge the responses of others, seeking reassurance or validation. Some masked irritation with forced smiles. Others maintained rigid postures, attempting to project composure. These moments highlighted the social complexity of the environment. An event that outwardly celebrated artistry and achievement was, beneath the surface, a delicate dance of perception, judgment, and relational dynamics. As whispers and gasps continued to thread through the room, the tension reached a subtle crescendo. Conversations became fragmented, punctuated by moments of silence and curiosity-driven glances. People who had initially been engaged in unrelated discussions now found themselves drawn to the central spectacle. Even those who tried to maintain distance could not escape the magnetic pull of attention, amplified by Spike Lee's laughter and the persistent presence of the camera. The combination of whispers, gasps, and glances created a kind of social feedback loop. Each reaction prompted another, amplifying the tension and curiosity in the room. It was impossible to ignore, impossible to sidestep, and impossible to fully control. The gala, which had begun as a structured and predictable celebration, had been transformed into a living narrative of human behavior, where observation, reaction, and interpretation became central to the experience. And then, as Meghan approached the center of the room, another subtle shift occurred. A glance exchanged with a prominent figure, a fleeting expression captured by the camera, and the room collectively held its breath. The tension was palpable, the whispers quieted as anticipation built. Everyone sensed that the moment was approaching, a moment that could define the night, spark conversation, and create a ripple effect beyond the gala's walls. The interplay of presence, observation, and reaction had reached a critical point. Spike Lee's amusement, now fully evident, acted as both anchor and amplifier. Those closest to him leaned in, curious to understand, to share in the humor, to anticipate what would happen next. The energy of the room became charged, a delicate mix of anticipation, intrigue, and subtle social navigation. Every participant, from celebrities to staff, was caught in the gravitational pull of the unfolding drama. But just as attention reached its peak, a new layer of complexity emerged. A subtle gesture, a whispered remark, an unexpected interaction began to hint that the situation was far from resolved. The whispers and gasps were not just reactions. They were prelude to a sequence of events that would escalate the intrigue, deepen the tension, and shift the dynamics of the gala in ways no one could have anticipated. What came next would transform the murmurs and curiosity into outright fascination, drawing every eye in the room, and setting the stage for a chain of moments that would define the night, reverberating long after the gala ended, and no one in attendance was ready for it. In any high-profile event, cameras are omnipresent. Photographers line the red carpet, journalists capture fleeting expressions, and streaming services meticulously document appearances for posterity. But rarely does a single presence command the same level of attention as the Netflix cameraman following Meghan Markle at the Critics' Choice celebration of Black cinema and TV gala. Unlike the standard media personnel who navigate their assignments discreetly, this cameraman operated differently. His presence was deliberate, intentional, and unwavering, an unspoken declaration that this moment, and Meghan herself, was not just being observed but curated for a broader narrative. From the moment she entered, the cameraman moved in subtle synchrony with Meghan. He maintained just enough distance to avoid intrusion, yet never strayed from the angle that captured her most defining movements. Each footstep, gesture, and glance was caught on camera, creating a live narrative that transformed the gala from a static celebration into a performance space. The tension was amplified by the knowledge that this documentation was not temporary. It was destined for streaming, editing, and a global audience, making every nuance more consequential than the room could have ever imagined. Guests noticed the cameraman immediately. Some whispered, curious about why someone would be so meticulously recording every movement. Others exchanged glances, silently questioning the implications. Was this part of a documentary? A special project? Or perhaps an attempt to control the narrative surrounding Meghan's presence in a space that was not traditionally hers? The questions hung in the air like invisible threads, connecting the whispers, curiosity, and reactions of every attendee. Spike Lee's awareness of the cameraman's role was instantaneous. The director's laughter from earlier, already sparked by Meghan's entrance, now found reinforcement in the deliberate and almost performative presence of the camera. There was something inherently ironic, even absurd, in the juxtaposition. A room full of accomplished, highly scrutinized celebrities now being observed as a secondary spectacle, filtered through a lens meant to document, yet inherently altering the dynamics it recorded. Spike Lee's amusement, which had begun as a subtle grin, had evolved into full acknowledgement of the intricate theater unfolding in real time. The cameraman did more than just record, he influenced. His lens dictated the flow of attention, subtly shaping how others interacted with Meghan. Guests became aware that any subtle gesture, a nod, a smile, or even a casual glance, could be immortalized on film. The awareness of this observation altered behavior, creating a web of social recalibration. Polished appearances became slightly more measured. Interactions gained layers of caution. Casual gestures carried an unintended performative weight. It was an invisible force, dictating social choreography with remarkable precision. Interestingly, the presence of the camera also magnified Meghan's own behavior. She walked with a heightened awareness of both the room and the lens, balancing poise with authenticity. Her gestures were deliberate, but not exaggerated. Her nods were polite, yet purposeful. Even small interactions, acknowledging a familiar face, responding to a whispered greeting, or moving gracefully through a crowd, took on amplified significance under the unblinking eye of the cameraman. It was a dance of optics, perception, and control, each participant negotiating their space within a narrative simultaneously lived and documented. Other attendees were acutely aware of this influence. Some navigated conversations with careful attention to body language, ensuring that nothing misinterpreted by the camera could reflect poorly in wider circulation. A few, however, reacted unconsciously, allowing curiosity or subtle amusement to peek through, which only added to the intrigue. The dynamic created a feedback loop. The camera observes, the reactions influence the room's response reinforces the camera's focus. Each step, gesture, and expression was amplified in significance, transforming a typical gala into a living, breathing narrative of observation and human behavior. Even staff members were affected. Servers moving through the crowd noted the subtle shifts in body language, gestures of acknowledgement, and the occasional pause in conversation. The presence of a continuous camera added pressure to maintain decorum not only for the guests but also for themselves. Every movement became a tiny performance, each interaction carrying the weight of potential visibility. It was an invisible tension threading through the room, one that would only intensify as the evening progressed. Spike Lee, ever perceptive, noticed how the cameraman's presence seemed to alter more than just Meghan's movements. It changed the dynamics of the room. The director observed subtle adjustments in seating posture, the fleeting glances exchanged between prominent figures, and the cautious smiles that masked genuine curiosity or skepticism. All of these micro-reactions, Spike realized, were as revealing as the footage being captured. The room was performing a narrative as much as it was being documented, a dual reality unfolding simultaneously. The role of the Netflix cameraman became more apparent as the night progressed. Not only was he documenting for an audience beyond the room, but he was also, intentionally or not, influencing the social calculus of the attendees. By being an ever-present observer, he injected an element of unpredictability, a layer of subtle tension that ensured no interaction would remain neutral. What might have been an inconsequential greeting or casual nod suddenly became meaningful under the scrutiny of a persistent lens. Every step Meghan took, every smile she offered, every polite acknowledgement became fodder for interpretation, speculation, and intrigue. And yet, despite the presence of the camera and the attention it commanded, Meghan maintained remarkable composure. She navigated the complex ecosystem of observation, performance, and social expectation with grace, balancing authenticity with awareness. Her calm in the face of this layered scrutiny only heightened the fascination of the room. Spike Lee, still observing, laughed intermittently, not mockery, but acknowledgement of the absurd elegance of the situation. The director recognized a rare combination. Calculated poise observed under the watchful lens of relentless scrutiny, an interplay that was both human and theatrical in equal measure. The presence of the cameraman also shaped subsequent interactions. Guests who initially appeared curious now approached Meghan with heightened awareness, adjusting gestures, tone, and body language to reflect not just personal intent but potential public perception. Conversations became subtly performative, influenced by the awareness of an unseen audience beyond the room. This invisible spectator, the camera, had transformed the social dynamics, turning casual encounters into carefully navigated performances. As the evening progressed, the tension between observation and authenticity intensified. Every exchange carried additional weight, every gesture was scrutinized, and every glance was amplified. Spike Lee's laughter served as both commentary and amplification, highlighting the humor and irony inherent in the interplay of human behavior, celebrity culture, and media presence. The gala, which had started as a traditional celebration of talent, had evolved into an organic social experiment, one where the power of observation, documentation, and human reaction converged in unexpected ways. By now, the room had fully adjusted to the presence of the Netflix cameraman, yet the energy remained charged. Guests continued to speculate, whisper, and recalibrate, while Meghan's composed demeanor provided a steady anchor amid the heightened scrutiny. The stage had been set for more drama, subtle confrontations, and unexpected moments. Every attendee understood, consciously or subconsciously, that nothing in the room would remain neutral for long. The dynamics had shifted irrevocably, and the ripple effect of observation was only beginning. And then, in a moment almost imperceptible but profoundly significant, a subtle interaction occurred. A glance, a nod, a fleeting exchange between two high-profile attendees that signaled the next escalation. The tension in the room, influenced and amplified by the constant presence of the cameraman, was about to reach its peak. What would happen next would draw the attention of everyone in the room, deepen intrigue, and set the stage for a moment that no one would forget. And it was all unfolding under the unblinking eye of the Netflix camera. The gala, which had begun as a carefully choreographed celebration of Black cinema and television, had transformed into a live study of human behavior. Meghan Markle's presence, paired with the Netflix cameraman's persistent gaze, had shifted the energy of the room in subtle but undeniable ways. Attendees who had arrived with expectations of a polished, orderly event found themselves navigating a new dynamic, one that blended curiosity, intrigue, and social recalibration. The tension was no longer a whisper. It had become a palpable force, threading through every conversation, gesture, and glance. Spike Lee, seated strategically near the center of the room, continued to observe with a mixture of amusement and fascination. His laughter from earlier had subsided into occasional chuckles, but his eyes never wavered from the scene unfolding before him. For him, the interaction was more than humorous, it was revealing. In every subtle expression, every sideways glance, and every whispered comment, he could see the interplay of perception, status, and expectation. The room had become a theater of unspoken power dynamics, and Meghan was the pivot point around which it revolved. Guests adjusted their positions, their gestures, and even their tone of conversation in response to her movements. Some leaned forward slightly, eager to catch a glimpse, a gesture, or an exchange that might offer insight into the unexpected presence in the room. Others, attempting to maintain composure, shifted subtly in their seats, smoothing attire or crossing legs with a controlled precision designed to convey elegance under observation. Every motion carried weight. Every glance was amplified by the awareness of both the camera and the room's collective gaze. Whispers continued to thread through the crowd, growing bolder as curiosity and intrigue took hold. "She's really here," one voice murmured. "And with that camera." "It's like the whole night just changed," another replied. Even those who tried to remain detached found themselves drawn in, caught between polite decorum and an irresistible fascination with the unfolding narrative. The presence of Meghan and the camera had created a social gravity that was impossible to resist, pulling every attendee into an intricate dance of observation, reaction, and subtle negotiation. Subtle gestures became charged with significance. A polite nod was interpreted as acknowledgement. A fleeting smile suggested approval or intrigue. A glance exchanged between two attendees carried layers of meaning. The room was alive with micronarratives, each participant performing within a web of unspoken rules, expectations, and the heightened awareness of observation. Even mundane interactions became laced with tension, their meaning magnified by the context of Meghan's presence and the ever-watchful lens documenting it all. Spike Lee's continued amusement served as a barometer for the room. Guests noted his reactions, interpreting his laughter and expressions as cues for their own behavior. In his unfiltered response, he communicated recognition, judgment, and commentary, simultaneously reinforcing the charged atmosphere and legitimizing the fascination with Meghan's entrance. It was a subtle but powerful influence, illustrating how one individual's unrestrained response can shape the perception of an entire audience. The Netflix cameraman's presence further amplified this tension. Every interaction, every gesture, and every glance was caught on camera, creating a feedback loop that reinforced the significance of Meghan's movements. Guests were not only performing for each other, but also for an unseen audience beyond the walls of the gala. This awareness influenced behavior, elevating subtle gestures into performative acts and magnifying the social complexity of each exchange. What might have been an ordinary greeting now carried the weight of scrutiny and potential interpretation. Conversations became fragmented as attendees adjusted to the heightened awareness. Laughter was more measured, smiles more deliberate, and words carefully chosen. Even casual remarks were punctuated by glances toward Meghan or the camera, as if to gauge the appropriateness of tone, content, or emphasis. The gala, originally designed as a platform for celebration and recognition, had evolved into a living experiment in attention, perception, and the nuanced choreography of social navigation. The tension also revealed itself in subtler ways. Guests unconsciously mirrored one another's reactions, creating a network of shared awareness that amplified curiosity and speculation. A subtle exchange of raised eyebrows, a slight lean forward, or a discreet whisper served as cues, creating a rhythm of attention that threaded through the room. The interplay of observation and reaction became a performance in itself, an unspoken drama unfolding parallel to the formal proceedings of the gala. Meanwhile, Meghan's composure remained unwavering. She navigated the crowd with poise, acknowledging acquaintances with a nod, offering polite smiles, and moving deliberately as the lens captured her every action. Her calm, measured demeanor served as a stabilizing counterpoint to the heightened tension around her, yet it also intensified curiosity. The juxtaposition of controlled elegance under scrutiny with the room's charged reactions created a dramatic contrast that heightened engagement and anticipation. Spike Lee, still observing, recognized the subtleties at play. He noted the unspoken power dynamics, the calculated gestures, and the social recalibrations occurring in real time. His laughter and quiet amusement were responses not just to the surface spectacle, but to the layered interplay of presence, attention, and influence. The room had become a microcosm of human behavior under observation, where each participant navigated a complex web of perception, expectation, and social strategy.